Captain Jared Monroe stood at attention in the Galactic Council chamber. The vast, sterile room buzzed with the low hum of alien voices murmuring in multiple languages. The Council, an intricate amalgamation of species from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, was poised on the edge of a delicate peace agreement. Earth, just a small fraction of the galactic map, had worked tirelessly to achieve this fragile balance. But Jared didn't care for the politics. He cared for one thing only: humanity's survival. He'd seen too much bloodshed in his 20 years of service. Diplomacy, he knew, was nothing but a game for the powerful. But he also understood its importance. The threat of war hovered like a storm cloud, and his presence here, his reputation, was the only thing that could keep the peace from collapsing. Jared adjusted the pristine uniform, black and silver with the emblem of Earth's military emblazoned on his chest. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the towering, spherical hollow projector at the center of the room. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded like a drum. The Galactic Council was about to vote on the most crucial issue of the century, the treaty that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. "You're representing Earth now," he muttered under his breath, as much to calm himself as to remind himself of the weight he carried. He was humanity's last hope, and that thought stuck in his mind like a thorn. Across the table sat General Thrick, the imposing Za'Tari commander. With reptilian skin and cold, piercing eyes, Thrick was everything humanity despised about the alien species. He radiated power, his presence alone chilling. But it wasn't just his reputation Jared was worried about. It was the arrogance in his stance, the way his tail flicked just above the floor, a clear sign of disrespect. The debate was heated. Words were exchanged like daggers, sharp and dangerous, each side trying to sway the vote in their favor. Earth wanted its independence, its voice in the galactic sphere. The Za'Tari, however, believed that humanity was too young, too reckless, to be given such power. "The Council will not yield to primitive tactics, Monroe," Thrick said, his voice a low, guttural growl that sent a shiver down Jared's spine. He leaned forward, his fangs just visible as he bared them in what he clearly thought was a grin. Jared met his gaze without flinching. "If you think we're the primitive ones, you've clearly forgotten the last decade of conflict," he said, voice steady, betraying no emotion. He wasn't about to let the Za'Tari bully Earth. The room quieted, all eyes on the two men. The stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just about treaties. This was about humanity's future. Thrick stood, the sound of his massive claws scraping against the stone floor echoed in the stillness of the room. He was a towering figure, and as he moved toward Jared, the tension in the chamber grew thick, almost tangible. The Council held its collective breath. "You still think Earth deserves its place here?" Thrick asked, his words slow, deliberate. "You're nothing but a small, chaotic species. You haven't earned this." Jared's fist clenched, but he forced himself to remain calm. He'd seen Thrick's type before, bullies who thrived on intimidation, on showing dominance. But he wasn't going to back down. "Not now. I'm not here to earn anything," Jared replied. "I'm here to protect my people. And if that means facing you, so be it." Thrick's eyes gleamed. In an instant, he crossed the distance between them and slapped Jared across the face. The crack of the impact reverberated through the chamber. Jared's head snapped to the side, but he didn't flinch. Blood trickled from the corner of his lip, but his expression remained unchanged. The Council gasped. The slap had been a calculated move, a challenge, an attempt to provoke. A move that would undo everything Jared had worked for. For a moment, the room stood still. Thrick's smug expression lingered, but the silence was unbearable. The Council members were on edge, afraid of what would happen next. Would humanity stand by and let the Za'Tari push them around? Or would they retaliate? Jared wiped the blood from his lip, eyes never leaving Thrick. The anger that boiled within him was controlled, measured. He had a reputation to uphold, but this was something different. This was more than an insult. It was an attack on everything he stood for. The slap wasn't just a personal affront. It was an affront to Earth, to humanity. He took a step forward, closing the space between them, his posture rigid, his every movement deliberate. The room seemed to hold its breath, anticipating what would happen next. The Za'Tari general smirked, unaware of the danger lurking in Jared's calm. 2 seconds. That's all it took. In a blur of motion, Jared's hand shot out, faster than anyone could react. His fingers wrapped around Thrika's throat, and with a single twist, the Za'Tari's skull cracked like an egg under the pressure. The general's body crumpled to the ground in a heap, lifeless. The room erupted into chaos. Council members scrambled to their feet, shouting, some in fear, others in outrage. But Jared stood there, calm as ever, the weight of his actions hanging heavy in the air. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low but filled with an undeniable force. "I'm sorry this had to happen, but I won't let anyone disrespect my people." The silence that followed was deafening. The weight of Jared's actions hung like a storm cloud over the council. But Jared knew one thing: the galaxy had just changed. And humanity was no longer a species to be pushed around. The council chamber had fallen into chaos. Jared stood amidst the aftermath of his decision, the body of General Thrick lying in the center of the room like a broken puppet. The stillness that followed his act of violence was suffocating, as if the entire galaxy had stopped to breathe in the moment. The room's security alarms blared, but Jared didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the lifeless body of the Za'Tari commander, and he allowed the weight of his actions to settle in. The Galactic Council had turned from a gathering of political leaders into a scene of utter disarray. Alien representatives from all corners of the galaxy shouted over one another, their voices thick with anger and fear. Some called for immediate retribution, while others seemed paralyzed, unsure of how to respond. The humans in the room were silent, their eyes trained on Jared. A sharp voice broke through the cacophony. "Captain Monroe, what have you done?" The speaker was Counselor Elian, a tall, silver-skinned Zora who had served as the voice of reason in countless debates. Now, her voice trembled with disbelief. Jared's face was expressionless as he turned to face her. "I did what had to be done," he said quietly, his words cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Thrika's disrespect was not just a personal insult, it was an insult to every human in this room." "An insult?" Elian's voice was tight, her words faltering as she processed the enormity of the situation. "You killed him in front of the entire council. Do you have any idea what this means? The Za'Tari will see this as an act of war." "I know," Jared replied flatly, his voice devoid of regret. "But I will not stand by while Thrick undermines humanity. He crossed a line, and now there are consequences." He could feel the weight of every eye in the room on him, their judgment heavy in the air. But even as his actions seemed to ripple out in every direction, there was one thing he knew for certain: he had crossed a threshold. There was no turning back now. "Enough!" barked an unfamiliar voice, cutting through the rising tension. The speaker was a short, stocky alien with sharp, angular features, a representative from the Yamath species. "Captain Monroe is right. Thrick has been a thorn in the side of this council for years. His actions were nothing short of contemptuous. This is an opportunity for humanity to show strength, not weakness." Jared's gaze snapped to the Yamath delegate, his tone clipped. "And what do you suggest we do, then? Do we simply let his death pass without action? Are we supposed to pretend nothing happened?" The Yamath representative, whose name Jared had yet to remember, looked at him squarely. "We don't need to kill them all, Captain. But we need to use this moment to our advantage. The galaxy respects power, and what you've done, what we've all witnessed here, is power. You have the opportunity to lead humanity into a new era, a position of authority no one will dare question. But at what cost?" Elian shot back, her voice strained. "A single moment of strength could spark a war that will destroy billions. The Za'Tari will not forgive this, and neither will many of the other council members. They will rally together, Captain. And Earth will pay the price." Monroe's jaw tightened, his thoughts spinning. He had known there would be consequences, but not this magnitude. He had taken a stand, but now he had to live with it. The room was divided, and the path ahead was unclear. He wasn't sure what he wanted from the Council, validation, perhaps, or a way forward. But for now, there was nothing but uncertainty. "I will not apologize for doing what's right," Jared said, his voice steady. "Thrick was a threat to everything we've worked for. The Zatari have underestimated us for too long. They needed to see that we won't be intimidated anymore. And yet you've set off a chain of events you can't control." Elian responded, her eyes hardening. "How long do you think the Zatari will wait before they retaliate?" "I don't know," Jared admitted, his gaze turning to the rest of the Council. "But I'll face whatever comes. And so will Earth." A sudden thud broke through the tension, the sound of a fist hitting the table. All eyes turned to the source, a tall, armored human soldier, his uniform bearing the insignia of the Earth's Galactic Marine Corps. He stood behind Jared, his face set in a grim expression. It was Captain Lorna Hart, Monroe's most trusted ally and friend. "Enough talking," Lorna said firmly, her voice ringing with authority. "We don't have time to waste. The Zatari will strike soon. We need to focus on how we respond." Jared nodded, his resolve hardening. He turned his back to the Council, allowing his gaze to fall on the chaos outside the chamber. The vast expanse of space stretched out before them, an endless void that seemed to mock their smallness. The stars were quiet, distant. The galaxy was waiting for someone to take charge, to lead. Jared wasn't sure if he was ready, but there was no choice. Earth was on the brink. Thrick's death had set the stage, but the war, the real battle, was just beginning. He had no illusions about what came next. The Zatari would come, and when they did, they wouldn't just be fighting Earth, they'd be fighting every human soldier who had ever bled for their species. "I'll do whatever it takes," Jared said, his voice low but determined. "We need to prepare for war. It's time to show the galaxy that humanity is not a species to be pushed around." The Council fell silent again, but this time, there was no more resistance. The path was clear, though the cost of it remained uncertain. As the room shifted into a flurry of activity, Jared turned toward Lorna. Her face mirrored his own resolve. "We'll need to act quickly," she said, her eyes narrowing as she looked out at the galaxy beyond. "The Zatari won't wait long." Jared's lips twisted into a small, grim smile. "Let them come." And in that moment, Jared Monroe knew one thing for certain: no matter the outcome, humanity's place in the galaxy had been forged in fire. And now, there was no going back. The dark expanse of space stretched out before Jared like a vast, endless ocean, cold, distant, and unforgiving. He stood at the edge of the Earth's Defense Command Center, the hum of activity around him as distant as the stars themselves. The once confident diplomats and politicians who had gathered in the Galactic Council chamber were now nothing more than whispers in the back of his mind. The true battle was about to begin, and it would be fought with far more than words. He stood alone, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the projections on the command center's walls. Every screen displayed images of the Zatari warships, huge, monstrous vessels that had been silently moving into position along the outskirts of Earth's orbit. Their advance was slow but relentless, a wall of metal and hostility, as inevitable as the tide. "Sir, we've received intelligence from the Amath." Lorna Hart's voice broke through the silence. She stepped into the room, her eyes sharp as she surveyed the situation. "They're mobilizing their forces. The Zatari aren't waiting, they're coming for Earth." Jared's gaze didn't shift from the screens. His mind raced with the implications. A full-scale Zatari offensive would be devastating. But the worst part? The Zatari weren't just coming for Earth, they were coming to make a statement. To show every species in the galaxy that the Earth would never be more than a pawn in their game. "They're coming," Jared said quietly, as if to himself. "But we'll be ready." Lorna crossed the room to stand beside him. "Ready? We're still reeling from the Council's reaction. Not everyone is on our side, Captain. The Thrick loyalists have already started spreading dissent. If we don't act now, we could lose any chance of forming a unified defense." Jared turned to her, his expression hard. "I know. But we're not just defending Earth anymore, we're defending humanity's place in the galaxy. That's why we're moving ahead with the plan. The plan. It was a risk, one that could tip the balance in their favor or destroy everything. Jared had made the call to escalate their response to the Za'Tari threat. The human fleet, once scattered and disorganized, was now being pulled into a single force, ready to strike back with brutal precision. But it was the Yamath, their newest allies in the fight, who would make all the difference. They had their own fleets, their own weapons, and they had pledged to stand with humanity in exchange for a promise: Earth's leadership in the coming galactic order. How long before the first strike? Lorna asked, her voice tight with urgency. Not long, Jared replied. He turned back to the projection screens, his mind calculating. The Za'Tari are closing in. We've got 12 hours before they reach our perimeter. But we'll hit them first. Hard. Lorna's eyes narrowed, and she stepped closer. And the Council? They'll never approve of a preemptive strike. Jared clenched his jaw. The Council isn't here to make decisions now. They've had their chance. His voice was low, but there was a sharpness to it that cut through the air. It's time for action. Just then, a communication officer entered the room, his expression grave. Sir, we've just received a transmission from the Za'Tari. They're demanding our immediate surrender and the immediate cessation of all military operations. They want us to stand down and accept their terms, or face annihilation. Jared's eyes flicked to the officer, but his face remained stoic. Put it through. The screen flickered to life, and the cold, reptilian face of a Za'Tari officer appeared. His greenish skin gleamed under the artificial lights, and his eyes glinted with malice. Captain Monroe, the Za'Tari officer hissed, his voice oozing with venom. You've made a grave mistake. The Za'Tari will not tolerate this act of defiance. Surrender now, and your people may yet survive. Resist, and your species will cease to exist. Jared met the officer's gaze with an icy calm. We'll never surrender, he replied, his voice low and steady. Humanity isn't your plaything, and you've underestimated us for the last time. The Za'Tari officer's eyes narrowed. So be it. Prepare to meet your end. The transmission cut off abruptly, and the room was filled with a heavy silence. Jared exhaled slowly. They've made their move. Now we make ours. He turned to Lorna, his mind already in motion, calculating every move. You'll lead the assault on the Za'Tari flagship. Take out their command structure. I'll coordinate the rest of the fleet. Lorna gave him a quick nod. Understood. As she turned to leave, Jared's mind raced with the gravity of their situation. This wasn't just a fight for Earth anymore. It was a fight for humanity's future. And if they lost this battle, if they lost the fight for survival, there would be no second chances. Hours later, the human fleet was positioned in high orbit, ready for the first strike. The ships were sleek, built for speed and precision, their weapons calibrated for maximum damage. But it wasn't just the human fleet they had to worry about. The Yamath had committed their ships to the fight, and their firepower was formidable. Still, Jared knew it wouldn't be enough to take down the Za'Tari. The first wave hit like a thunderclap, the sound of exploding plasma filling the void as missiles and laser fire streaked through space. The Za'Tari retaliated almost immediately, their massive warships firing back with terrifying precision. Launch the second wave, Jared commanded, his voice steady, though his mind was a whirl of calculations. He knew every move he made now would dictate the future of his people. The battle raged on as the two forces collided in the vastness of space, the black void illuminated by the glow of burning ships. Jared watched the projection screens intently, knowing that this moment, this first strike, would either secure humanity's place in the galaxy or lead them down a path of destruction. Captain, Lorna's voice crackled through his earpiece. We've hit their flagship. But we've taken heavy fire. We're losing ships. Jared's heart tightened, but his voice remained calm. Hold your position. Reinforcements are on the way. We're not backing down now. But even as he spoke, he knew that the battle was only just beginning, and that the stakes would only get higher from here. The Za'Tari wouldn't stop until humanity was crushed beneath their heel. But Jared Monroe was determined to make them regret ever underestimating Earth. The storm had begun. The battle raged on. The stars above Earth, once a peaceful sight, were now engulfed in a deadly dance of explosions and fire. Jared Monroe stood in the command center of the human fleet, watching the chaos unfold on the hollow projection screens. It was hard to believe this was happening, that humanity was now fighting for its survival against a far superior enemy. "Another Za'Tari cruiser just went down, Captain," the communications officer reported, his voice strained. "But they've reinforced their lines. Our forces are starting to scatter." Jared's gaze didn't waver from the screen. He'd seen this before, the desperate fight against overwhelming odds. The Za'Tari were relentless, and they knew how to break their enemies. But he wouldn't let Earth fall. Not like this. "Regroup the Second Fleet," he ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. "Tell them to hit the flanks. We need to split their forces and give Lorna a clear path to the flagship. She's our only shot at taking down Thrick's loyalists for good." "Understood," the officer replied, quickly sending the order. Jared's mind was racing, calculating, anticipating every move the Za'Tari would make. This wasn't just a simple space battle, it was a fight for everything humanity had worked for. The consequences of failure were too great to even consider. He couldn't afford to lose. "Captain, incoming transmission from Lorna," another officer called out, her voice laced with urgency. Jared took a deep breath. "Put it through." The hollow screen flickered, and Lorna's familiar face appeared, her expression hardened but focused. Behind her, the sounds of explosions and gunfire echoed. "We've hit the flagship's outer defenses," Lorna said quickly, her voice tight. "But they've got reinforcements, Captain. We're pinned down. The flagship's core is heavily shielded. We can't get through unless we take out their external weapons grid." Jared's mind spun with the information. Lorna was right. Without crippling the Za'Tari flagship, there would be no way to win this fight. The core had to fall. If they could break the flagship, the Za'Tari would lose their nerve. But first, they had to get close enough to do the damage. "Take out their weapons grid, and we'll hit them with everything we've got," Jared said, his voice unwavering. "Hold your ground. Reinforcements are on the way." Lorna's eyes met his through the hollow screen. "Understood. We'll need a distraction. Can you pull their forces off our tail long enough for us to make our move?" Jared didn't hesitate. "I'll give you everything we've got. But you need to act fast, Lorna. The longer we wait, the harder this will get." Without another word, Lorna's image vanished as she returned to her ship, her resolve clear. Jared stood in silence for a moment, allowing the weight of the situation to press against him. He wasn't just commanding a fleet, he was commanding humanity's future. There would be no second chances. Not for him, not for Earth. "Captain!" Lorna's voice crackled again, the static momentarily making her words unclear. "We're launching a direct assault on their weapons grid. You need to clear us a path. They're holding us at bay with their secondary defense systems." Jared's eyes scanned the projections, the Za'Tari forces like a massive wall, seemingly impenetrable. But he could see the cracks, weaknesses. It was time to exploit them. "Target their secondary fleet," Jared ordered, his voice calm but firm. "We're going to break their formation and create a hole. I need full power to the forward weapons. We take out their reinforcements first, nothing else matters." The fleet responded immediately, maneuvering into position as Jared watched their progress. The space before them erupted in a blaze of fire as the human ships launched volleys of missiles, striking Za'Tari vessels with deadly accuracy. The Za'Tari retaliated fiercely, but the opening Jared had created was just wide enough. "Lorna, move!" Jared barked into the comms, his pulse quickening as the battle unfolded in real time. "Now or never." For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the sound of blaster fire and ship-to-ship transmissions. Then, Lorna's voice broke through the static, sharp and victorious. "We're in," she said, her voice filled with relief. "Weapons grid is down. The flagship's shield is failing. We have a clear shot at the core." Jared's breath caught in his chest, the weight of her words sinking in. The flagship was vulnerable. This was it, the turning point. "Deploy all forces," he commanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. "We hit them with everything. No mercy." The human fleet surged forward like a tidal wave, ships arcing through the void, their weapons blazing with precision. The Za'Tari, now on the defensive, struggled to hold their ground. The human forces, fueled by desperation and determination, tore into the enemy with a ferocity that even Jared had never seen before. "Core breach imminent," another officer called out, the urgency in his voice unmistakable. The hollow screen in front of Jared flickered again, and the image of Lorna appeared, her face pale but resolute. "It's done, Captain. The core is gone. They're retreating." Jared exhaled, his body relaxing for the first time in hours. "Good work, Lorna. Pull back and regroup. We've won this one, but there's more to do." The transmission cut out, and the hollow projections shifted. The once ominous Za'Tari ships were now retreating, their formations broken and disorganized. The human fleet pressed on, dismantling the remaining defenses with deadly precision. Jared's hands gripped the edge of the console, his thoughts rushing in 1,000 directions. The flagship had fallen, but the cost had been immense. The battle wasn't over. The Za'Tari would return with more ships, more reinforcements, but now, humanity had the upper hand. "Captain," the comms officer spoke up again, his voice cautious. "We've received a message from the Za'Tari. They're requesting a ceasefire." Jared's brow furrowed. "A ceasefire? After everything?" The officer nodded. "They're offering terms. They say they'll reconsider their invasion if we agree to join them in a galactic alliance." Jared stood still for a moment, weighing the options. His hand hovered over the comms console, ready to respond. "No," he said quietly, his voice resolute. "We don't negotiate with our enemies. Not now. Not ever." The room was silent, but Jared could feel the shift, the heavy weight of their victory. The Za'Tari had underestimated humanity, and now they would learn the cost of that mistake. "Prepare for the next phase," he said, turning back to the projection. "Humanity is not just a pawn. We're players now." The stars outside Earth's atmosphere flickered in the distance, but for the first time in the battle, they didn't seem so far away.